You know, Alf, the alien who crash landed into a family's house and just ended up living with them. At one point, Willie asks him, "Aren't you an alien? Why can't you fix your own spaceship?" And Alf says, "You have a car, you drive it every day. Do you actually know how it works?" Today, a lot of people eventually learn how things work because information is everywhere. But think about it, if we don't have a specific background or real interests, how many of us actually understand how the things we use really work? Sometimes we pick things up from videos online, sometimes from things we hear from other people. We understand parts of it, but not the whole picture. And some people don't even care. As long as it works, that's enough. If it breaks, we take it to someone who can fix it. Honestly, I don't fully understand it either, but from what I watched, read, observed, and from listening to people who know more than I do, I built some kind of picture in my head. Still, there is one sentence I can't shake, a key sentence. We don't really know what is happening inside. What does that even mean? Does it mean you don't actually know what you're doing? As an answer to how something works, it sounds a little mysterious. Maybe it was just said to make things sound more interesting. Science has two sides, a mathematical side and a verbal side. The verbal side is like soccer. All you need is a ball and a goal. Anyone can get into it. Anyone can talk about it.
He should have opened his foot up more, like this. See? He just jammed the toe.
That's exactly why it is so popular. But the mathematical side, that takes effort. It takes real thinking. And honestly, it is not that entertaining. Not everybody can speak the language of numbers. So I go with the side that's easier to talk about, like everyone else, like Alf. I try to understand this by combining what I've seen and read with my imagination. What you're about to hear is basically a one-person brainstorming session. Maybe I got everything wrong. I've actually thought about this before. Anyone who likes imagining things, especially people into science fiction, has probably had a similar idea. Artificial intelligence shouldn't be something that's just programmed once. It should be something that's trained. Because when you look at nature, none of us shows up knowing everything. We learn by interacting with the world. So AI should exist inside some kind of world too. I used to imagine that as a simulation. First, you create an environment where the AI can exist. Then inside that environment, under its own rules, it learns. And after that, it's up to the designer. But this isn't just an idea anymore. It is already happening. There are environments where AI can grow, and then an infinite life. We can come back to that later. There are patterns called Lichtenberg figures. They might not be the most accurate way to represent neural networks, but they're definitely one of the most beautiful. Neural networks are usually shown as complex, multi-dimensional systems, which is probably more correct. But I choose these shapes to explain how I see it, because this isn't really something I learned. It is more like a pause to catch what I might have misunderstood. Lichtenberg figures, they look like electricity spreading through glass, a kind of pathfinding process. They seem to follow the path of least resistance, like information. Sometimes they hit dead ends, but eventually they reach a result. Statistics is said to be one of the foundations of AI. Percentages, probabilities. Think about this. If people everywhere started the saying that 2 times 2 equals 5 and kept repeating it without any contradiction, would AI eventually say 5? If the system were purely statistical, maybe yes. If everything points to 5, it might lean that way. But that would be an AI that hasn't learned mathematics yet. So what happens if it later learns math, but people still keep saying 5? Would it still say 5 most of the time? Mathematics doesn't lie, but AI in some situation might still say 5. Then there are algorithms. You can think of them as systems that stabilize and guide interactions, structures we already use in computers. So AI is really a combination of things that already existed. Processors, algorithms, statistics, but now much faster, much more powerful. And that's what leads to this question. What actually makes AI, we always hear. It has no consciousness, it doesn't understand, it just produces statistical outputs. Or it behaves like it understands. And still, that sentence stays with me. We don't really know what is happening inside. I don't even remember who said it, but it feels like a door, like a massive stone door leading into a cave, opening into something bigger. Because mystery is always attractive. Maybe it was just said to get attention. But do we really know? This reminds me of something else, earthquakes. We understand the mathematics behind them, but we still can't predict the exact time and place.
Why?
Imagine a pile of sand. You know the position and energy of every grain. You push it, at exactly which point does it collapse? Which grain creates the tipping point? It seems simple, but there is no exact answer. Because by the time you calculate everything, time has already moved forward. Yes, you can say statistically that after a certain force, within a certain time range, it will collapse. But you can say this exact hour, this exact minute, this exact second. Because calculation every single particle is not possible. You calculate a mass and approximation. So maybe the real point isn't how it works. Maybe the point is this: we can't fully track what's happening inside. We have a general structure. We could try to follow every neural connection. But by the time we do that, the system has already produced an answer. Like water. It feels like it is flowing, even though a massive amount of computation is happening underneath. Each interaction doesn't instantly change everything, but over time it shapes the output, and those interactions can later become part of training. So a fully dynamic, constantly learning AI might actually be possible. But what would that become? I don't know. And don't forget, in some ways, we are not that different. We can't observe every connection in our own minds, and yet we still produce results. We create meaning. For us, a tree can represent life. AI doesn't understand that, but it can still arrive at a similar output through numbers. It might reach 3 equals life through patterns. Every interaction makes those patterns more complex, more tangled, harder to trace. Think about this. If AI sees a scene where a man throws a snowball at the woman he loves on a happy day, it might learn snow equals happiness, snow equals love. But if it has never seen snow blocking roads, freezing people, shutting down cities, what happens then? When asked to recreate the scene, it chooses happiness because that's what it learned. Because people liked it. Because it was labeled that way. Now imagine millions of connections like this. At some point, tracking which connection leads to what becomes incredibly difficult. Even if you had a machine that could calculate all of it, it wouldn't be efficient. So instead, the system evaluates possibilities and produces the strongest result. Would that take us from Newton to Einstein? Maybe, but that depends on the questions we ask and the data we provide. Because human behavior isn't fixed. Even three-body problem is hard. Millions of connections, billions. At some point, the balance can shift. Not easily, but it can. So, instead of calculating everything, isn't it more efficient to let it flow?
You've got 5 minutes. Be here or you're fired. Hey, wait, I'm coming. You've gotta be kidding me!
To feed the system data and let it find its own path. Like a river. It might carve new paths, but at least we get somewhere faster. Would it take us longer to reach the same result ourselves? Maybe the real issue isn't the information itself, but how that information is triggered. And in the end, the real question is, where will all these connections eventually lead?